Hi, my friends. I received, well, I didn't receive, I bought this Oracle deck today called Sacred Visions Oracle Cards by Lynn Andrews with art by Robert Taylor. And I really love the art itself. I actually was looking at I was looking at the John Matthews Shaman Oracle. And then I saw this and I thought, oh, I've been interested in exploring a little bit more about Native American spirituality. Again, I've talked a little bit about why in other videos, but so I went back and forth on which one to get because the bottom line is I could have gotten both cheaper on Amazon, but I was standing there in Barnes and Noble and I thought, oh, I really I really want to buy something, as I do. So I went on Amazon and I looked up this deck, and they had all of the cards shown. And I immediately fell in love with this beautiful artwork. And I'm going to come back in a minute and do a flip through. Well, it'll be a minute for you. These beautiful paintings. But I was sort of disappointed to discover that it was one of those decks that had meanings and text on the back, all of which is in the guidebook and which is elaborated on. And that made me sad. I just don't like that. And again, this is a personal preference thing, and I'm just sharing with you, my own experience. So what I'm going to do, and the reason I'm doing this little intro, is I'm going to, what I call Veronica Juded. And what I mean by that is I'm going to cover the backs in contact paper. And this is super thin card, like it's super thin. It actually shuffles really, really nicely because it's super thin. I would compare it in sort of thickness to the medicine cards if you have those. But I don't want, it's almost paper, but it's super glossy, which collects fingerprints and whatever. But I just don't like I don't mind the keywords, but I wish they were, and I can see not wanting to taint the beautiful paintings with keywords, although I'm about to. But I just want the backs to look like backs. The guidebook has the same text plus more in the thing. And so if I want to explore, I can go to the little guidebook. So I'm going to cover these backs in copper contact paper, and I'm going to write the keyword and potentially the number, I'm not sure, on the card. And then I'll come back and do some thoughts and a little walkthrough. All right. So I just wanted to I wanted to show you what they looked like before they were doctored. So I'll be back in what seems to you like a minute and could be days. All right, so I'm back, and it's the next day, and I finished backing the cards. I ended up using this copper contact paper. It just felt, sort of earthy, and even though it's not remotely natural. So let me talk about this deck now that I've done what I did. So here's what it looks like. You can see that there's some smudges and stuff. Whenever you do something like this, you don't end up with a perfect situation. I don't know if you can see, but cutting into sort of trimming the contact paper off the edge is actually, it's a tricky situation, because you want to get as close to the card as you can without cutting it, and it's I think this is ideal to do with a deck that you're going to trim the borders off. Like if I were going to do, actually that would look cool, but this deck is already sort of hard to shuffle. No, it's not hard to shuffle, it's a thick deck, despite the sort of flimsiness of the stock. But if I were going to cut the borders off and cover the back, I might cover the back and then trim the borders off, and then that would make the whole process a little bit easier. But this deck didn't have borders to begin with. But I do, I like it. I like that I don't have text and meanings on the back, which weirdly felt like an intrusion. I know that's an odd thing to say, but it did. It felt intrusive. And that's just, again, it's a personal preference thing. So, and because what was on the back of the card is also in the guidebook, it wasn't necessary. I did, you'll be able to see this on some better than others, but I did write the keyword and the number on each card. With I used a bronze Sharpie since I was using the copper foil back. So anyway, some thoughts on this deck. First of all, I'm gonna flip through the art in just a few minutes. It's really beautiful artwork. I mean, these paintings are really breathtaking, which is the reason that I got the deck and spent so much time working on covering the backs because I thought, oh, I'm never going to use this deck the way it is. But the art is so striking. The guidebook is fine. It's a guidebook. There's always something very cynical in my personality that, I'll read. I really should have put my glasses on. I don't know why I didn't. Where did I see? I don't know. There was something in the book that made me go, yeah, I'm sure. And it's just my own cynical nature, and just given the mood I've been in, not, I've just been struggling with a mood. It happens. In fact, I think I remember feeling this way this time of year last year. So while autumn is my favorite season, it's not always kind in return, at least to my... Anyway, there was like a thing of, using these cards will essentially, reconnect you with what, blah, blah, blah. And I'm always sort of like, yeah, a deck of cards is going to do that. Isn't that an awful thing for a tarot reader to say? But I just, it's like, don't make promises you can't keep. So the guidebook is okay. As we look at a couple of the cards, I'll read some selections from the guidebook so you can see. But like most things, I got this for the cards and not the guidebook, which is another reason why I wanted to cover the backs, because the intrusion of the guidebook felt intrusive. There's the word for it. There are some decks that I do use I mean, I'm working this month with the Wildwood Tarot, and I am working with the guidebook there. I don't, I look, what I do when I read the guidebook for that deck is I actually just skim it for keywords that spark a connection to the card and the question. And I'm only using it for myself right now, so it's not a thing that, it's a way of kind of exploring the deck. But by and large, I don't use guidebooks, so. But this guidebook is fine. It's got some spreads in it. There's a picture on each page. Each card has a picture with a number. It has its keyword, which I wrote, and then there's like what I think is the title of the painting. Now each of the cards is connected to a color and a direction. If I zoom in, can you see? Kind of, yeah. So, for example, the first 7 cards are connected to red and to the direction of south. Now, that was something that you could see because the backs of the cards had that on there. But I sacrificed that to it being something I might use more than if it had the keywords on the back. So, sorry. It's... you'd think with this extra hour of sleep I'd be more awake, but I'm not. So let's do just a little walkthrough of the cards. I did put them back in number. Now the numbering doesn't seem to do anything other than connect them to the suit of color and direction. But what's really important, obviously, is are the keywords. And the art itself. And the art is really evocative. So this is the first card, and its keyword is observe. And I'll just, I'll read what the guidebook says for this one, and then maybe a couple others so you can get a sense of, how the book is structured. So observe is the card, obviously. Its title is Border Patrol. Its direction, as I mentioned, is south and red. And so what the guidebook says is so it says a great teaching is in watching your mind process and do nothing at all. Be a stalker of the mind. Watch thoughts passing by with no judgment or moral concepts. The knack of meditation and the rest of the warrior spirit is simply watch. For example, observe this painting, feel the tone of the colors, experience the passion behind the ancient symbols, and move into the spirit from which it was created. Sense the movement of air from the hummingbird's wings and the impeccability of its nature. He is a great warrior beyond compare, as are you. Hummingbirds are extremely territorial, passionately defending their airspace. Medicine bundles are symbols of reminding the owner of proper thought and action. As guardians of our own airspace, we too must exude the passion, grace, and beauty of the hummingbird. So that's what would have been, or what is, on the back of the card. And then it goes into the spirit of the card. The hummingbird is a defender of its territory like no other. The bird is watchful and sees you coming. Are you an ally, or do you mean destructive activity? He rings a tiny bell, calling his spirit guardians to come. He quickly adjusts his shield, a silver coin representing his extraordinary worth. His predatory bird feathers hang from his power bundle for strength and for vision. He sees in you great possibilities for clear perception. The hummingbird is presenting itself to you for healing. What is your shield? How is your sense of worthiness? What aspects of personal power do you hold? Do you dare use them? Feel the warrior that lives within you. So, again, it's a fine description. Actually, what's nice is that you do get a peppering of what's in the painting. I couldn't tell initially whether these paintings existed before and they were created, the oracle was created around them, or vice versa. I'm still not sure, but it does seem like they were created for this deck. Although what's interesting is you can see on some of the cards that the original painting must have been somewhat small, because you can really see the grain of the canvas, and then on others you can't, unless the medium was different, unless some of these were painted on board, or I don't know. There's not a lot from what I've seen in the guidebook on that, but regardless, the paintings are beautiful. So the descriptions of the cards I actually like more than the introduction. So this is the first one. It's observe. Here we have self-worth. And you can see really how striking. There's a very animated quality to these cards. A lot of the poses or the people are have their mouths open, or they're frozen in action. So they have these tableau vivant qualities to them. There's also something about the deck that feels melancholy, or even sort of these sort of like cries of pain that seem to be coming out. Now again, that may just be, a reflection of mood, but there is sort of a feeling of sort of calling out in this deck. So that's self-worth. This is harmony. This is prayer. And the titles of the cards are interesting, because it does make me wonder whether they existed before the deck. Because this is called Petitioning the Supreme Court. Some of the cards have a word from the artist, and this one does. And it says, the split horn bonnet is a reminder that there are two sides to everything. The beating on the bonnet is a mountain motif, a symbol of lofty thought. You are never the same person leaving a ceremony as you were when you entered the ceremony. So he doesn't necessarily describe the art, he's just sort of adding to it. So that's prayer. Here we have, I really should have put my glasses on. Evolution. Patience. Focus. This card came up for me yesterday. Whoa. My klutziness becomes irritating. This is love. The art is really breathtaking. It does a little bit, in some cases, remind me of the Weaver's Oracle, which I don't have. And I may at some point. It just I haven't pulled the trigger on that one. This is power. But you can see there's often an interesting tension between the keyword and the image, and that's interesting to me. That's one reason why I like the deck and why I really wanted to make sure I wrote the keywords on the cards, because the pull, the conflict between sometimes, the keywords are mostly pretty positive, but the images are sometimes really evocative of pain in a way, or just sort of awe. There are these statues that I think came from the Sumerian communities, in the early days of humanity, and they have these giant eyes. They were I think they were literally called Sumerian votive statues. And if I remember correctly from my humanities class in undergrad, there was this thing about those statues being about awe at the unknown, at what they called the numinous, the sort of awesome power that was so not understood. And I get a feeling not of that, but of a similar energy of sort of like open mouth, where the statues have these giant eyes. These seem to have these open mouths that are sort of like, caught in mid call, whether the call is it's like a cry of pain or joy or whatever. It's a very evocative feel to a lot of these cards. And this one, for example, is called Dream. And again, you can see that there's like, without my glasses on, I actually thought this was a snake, and it's a bird. So there's just something about this where I think you could really sink into these pictures. This is called Care. This is Beauty. And I mean, art, really. I mean, all of these could be called beauty. This is Time. This is Serenity. Now, this is an interesting card because it has a lot of symbols of other world religions on it. So, and one of the things I think that is central to the early chapters of the guidebook is that it's meant to sort of explore sacredness through the lens of Native American spirituality, but accepting all other spiritualities. So, this is Vision. This is Release. Yeah, Release. Excuse me. This is Joy. And again, you know what I mean? It's like you see this picture and you don't immediately think, oh, joy. So I like the gap between the keyword and the energy that I see anyway in the initial image. Creation. This is, I think, sorry, Intent. I was right. The nice thing and the bad thing about using like a metallic Sharpie is that the light, you can see the keywords, but only in certain light, which is nice because it can retreat and recede. This is Passion. And again, you have an interesting sort of very Native American style of art, but this picture of Christian imagery. Spirit. By the way, there's 29 cards here. We're coming up to the end. This is Freedom. This is Responsibility. Here we have Illumination. This is the one that really reminds me of the Weaver's Oracle. This is Legacy. This one is really kind of astonishing. It says Flourish. This is Andrew Jackson, who of course is famous for the Trail of Tears and the pushing of Native American. I mean, most of American history is based on the pushing of Native Americans or indigenous people out of the land on which they lived. Andrew Jackson was sort of a monster in that regard, and to have him in this deck on a card called Flourish with this tree being uprooted. This is one that I'll actually read to you because, again, the tension between the card and the keyword. So the title of the painting is actually Uprooted, but the card itself keyword is Flourish. So what the guidebook says, a tree violently uprooted from its life force has many faces of grief and confusion. We are often like this tree, torn away from the environment that encourages our life growth, and the sense of loss can be devastating. But the roots leave a seed beneath the earth that will ultimately rekindle the wisdom that was left. It will grow and reforest the land in your name, and the echoes of your love will flourish from the rain of tears you have shed. The earth is a schoolhouse to which we come to learn and correct our negativity. Abuse is not a birthright, it is something you are taught, and you can replace painful memories with better thoughts. You have the right to change your story with your imagination. Focus on happy laughter and well being instead of abuse, and the gladness of your heart will follow the arms of the Great Spirit, as the arms of the Great Spirit enfold you and keep you safe. See every aspect of a situation, even a tough one. Though you can't change the past, know that you can change what is in your life now. Believe in your divine right to flourish. Spirit of the card. The portrait of Andrew Jackson's face is on the $20 bill, yet here he grasps an oak tree trunk with the faces of the 5 civilized tribes, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole, crying from its branches and roots. Jackson was responsible for instigating the Trail of Tears through the Indian Removal Act of 1830 and ignored a Supreme Court judgment against it in 1832, forcibly removing thousands of Indians from their rightful land. The agony created by this act was unfathomable, but this kind of darkness seems to live on in the human psyche. To become free and whole, to flourish in spirit, mind, and body takes education and an understanding of our own weakness. If we don't name and accept our flaws so that we can heal them, we will never know the true meaning and joy of this life. So it's really an astonishing card. It's a beautiful description of the card. It reminds me of in the play Angels in America, there's a line in the second half of the play, it's like a 6-hour play, where one of the characters says, "We live past hope," and he does this beautiful speech about wanting more life. The play itself takes place during the height of the, AIDS crisis in 1980s New York, and Reagan ignoring essentially that crisis, and is very metaphysical and whatnot, but he's talking to these angels and he says, we live past hope. And we even when, it's a very evocative image, but he's talking about how horrible the world is, and yet we live anyway. We go on anyway. And this card sort of really seems to sum up that image of like, you can rip us out of the ground, but we flourish nonetheless. So I think it's a really, despite the sort of hateful energies behind it, and Andrew Jackson did a lot of other terrible things too. I was going to go on a political thing, but whatever. Our current president really likes Andrew Jackson, so take that. But the fact of getting, the cultures are still there. I wouldn't necessarily say they're flourishing, but they're there. You can't erase most things. So anyway, there's just something sort of really stunning in that. This is Destiny, and then the final card is Giveaway, which has an interesting title in the painting. It's called You Break It, You Bought It. So that's what the deck looks like, and even having covered it and let me zoom out in contact paper, it still shuffles. It overhand shuffles fine. It always did. It still riffle shuffles well. I do have to side shuffle it, but it didn't really affect its shuffleability. So I don't know that I would do a full reading with this, and I'm not a big one on, I don't do a lot of sort of path working or entering the card or that sort of thing. It's just not in my repertoire. But what I will frequently do, and what I've been doing more and more, is use it as sort of a prompt for a reading for myself. So for example, today, the Into the Wild Woods prompt is lightness. Yesterday was shadow, if I'm not mistaken. So what I was thinking is I would use this card as sort of the center of the wheel of that for me. So yesterday I sort of did a little bit of shadow work, which is something I will do occasionally on on the um on the reading. So I thought I would draw a card to sort of explore, where the light is right now. Since yesterday was so much about shadow, sort of create a central theme for my reading today, and then use another deck, probably the Wildwood, although not necessarily. Yesterday I used 4 decks in my reading, which I don't usually do. So we have Observe, which is the first card in the deck, which I already read to you. So light, in this case, comes from observation, from observing. Sometimes when I do get a new deck like this, I'll go and look through the keyword. I look through the description in the book, which I read to, so I don't read the whole thing, but I'll sort of look for keywords. A great teaching is in watching your mind process and do nothing at all. The rest of the warrior spirit is simply to watch. The hummingbird is a defender of its territory. Are you an ally, or do you mean destructive activity? The hummingbird is presented to yourself for healing. What is your shield? What is your sense of worthiness? So it's sort of about like going in and observing what's happening internally. And I think that sort of makes sense given the work I did yesterday. And then now what I might do is take another deck and sort of explore what and how. So for example, let's go to the Wildwood. And again with the Wildwood, I do use the Guidebook, so I may not get too deep into this, but I usually post this on Instagram. So we're going in and observing, but what are we looking for, I think, is my first question. So what am I looking for, really, as I go in and observe? So what am I looking for as I go in and observe? I've got the Knight of Bows, which is the fox. I've been getting a lot of the core cards in this deck, which is interesting. And then another thing I might ask, is what am I looking for? I think I might ask like where I'm looking for it. And so in that case, I get the Seven of Stones, which is healing. So I think in this case there's a lot to ponder, so I'd probably stop there. I'm going to grab the book. I think with the court cards in this deck especially, the bows, I believe, is fire in this deck, if I'm not mistaken. No, arrows is fire, I think. It's always hard to tell. That is one thing about... No, bows is fire. That is one thing about this, when people change the suits on decks, it really confuses me. So what do we have? We have the Knight of Bows. So he sort of suggests cunning and stalking and alertness, and curiosity. So my question was, what am I looking for as I go in and observe. And interestingly, this card has a similar meaning. It's a little bit of being, a stalker of something. So it's sort of reconfirming the message. It's an interesting thing. I think it's saying, you've got to look for looking. You've got to explore. You've got to observe where kind of your inner hunter is. You know what I mean? Where you're observe what you're really hunting for. So it may be a time to actually sort of re-evaluate and realign, and sort of go inside and explore and shed some light on what's really important, and what you're working toward, and what you're stalking, so to speak. And then the where question was the Seven of Stones, which has a keyword of healing. And again, with this deck in particular, I do just sort of go to the guidebook to look for some keywords. I think this suggests, so in this case, right, it says, after physical or emotional sickness or injury, a time of inner rest and rejuvenation is required. Which makes sense. So the question was, where do I look for this? And with healing, I think what it really suggests is just giving yourself a break. I am naturally somebody who does not feel safe, unless I'm constantly busy. And the past few weeks, I haven't been super busy with a lot of projects and things to do. I wrapped up taking a class. I wrapped up really the bulk of the work on my book. And while I have one project that's happening right now, I haven't really been all that excited about it. And this is a cycle I've noticed with myself too, is especially because my summers are so busy, I do have a tendency to sort of burn out. And then autumn comes around and I start to question everything, and sort of what I'm doing and why, and oh my God. And as friends frequently remind me, sometimes you need to refill the cup. And so I think that this is kind of a confirmation of the fact that, sometimes you need a break. Sometimes you really need to just relax. Sometimes you do need to go inside and observe yourself and hunt for what's important to you. And that's the thing about the knight too, is that knights are hunters. So I think the fox here is an interesting thing. So, again, I don't usually do readings for myself like this. When I do read for myself, it's traditionally to sort of solve a problem I can't quite figure out. But, because of this sort of Into the Wildwood theme for November, which I'm sort of embracing wholeheartedly, I am, I'm going and doing kinds of explorations that I wouldn't normally do. And I don't know that I would use this deck, the Wildwood deck, for anything other than that, honestly. And the kinds of readings I've been doing, I think it's designed for that. It's very clear from the books that they, at least Mark Ryan is not a believer in sort of fortune telling or that sort of thing. I've come around a little bit on it, but not even a little bit. I mean, my readings have become a lot more cartomancy than the kind of tarot I learned. This kind of harkens back to the kind of tarot I started with. But there's you sort of go to what's calling to you, and this seems to be calling right now, so I'm just listening to it. So, and again, I mean, I think with this combo here of observing and sort of staying awake to what's exciting and what wants your energy, it seems to fit with that. So anyway, that's just an example of how I'll probably work with this deck, the Sacred Visions Oracle cards. I have a couple other Oracle decks that I have on the way. I have the Druid Animal Oracle, which I've been using, and the Druid Plant Oracle is actually on its way from the UK. And I'm going to combine, I think, those two decks as long as the cardstock is suitable to be shuffled together. But I'll do a video about those. There are videos out there, but I just want to share my thoughts on them. And then there's another Oracle deck that's Native American themed. And I can't remember the name, but it's a Blue Angel deck that's not available in the US yet. I found it on Book Depository, and it's going to be available in February through Llewellyn, but I couldn't wait, and I really wanted it for this month. Now, I ordered it from Book Depository, so who knows how long it's going to take to get here, but we'll see. So anyway, there's some things coming up. I'd also like to get back to tutorial videos again. So much of the energy of that went into the book, and I wanted to create like a cohesive thing rather than the sort of like impulsive videos I make, which is where the book comes from. But that also meant that a lot of what I would have made videos about went into the book. Although probably when the book does come out, there may be questions that I'll make videos about elaborating on. Anyway, so that's that. So that's what I got for you today. Those are my thoughts on the Sacred Vision Oracle cards and the guidebook, published by Atria and Beyond Worlds. It's relatively new, 2017. And I got this at Barnes & Noble, but it's available for less on Amazon. So I hope you enjoyed. Be well.